Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Education Subcommittee of the House of Delegates of the House Ways and Means Committee. We're going to get started with House Bill 71, a bill that we discussed in the past that we're secondary on. The House Judiciary Committee is primary on this bill, but our committee oversees education, and this bill has a lot to do with education of our students. So I wanted to, Alistair, if we can go down, I think most of everyone already knows what this bill does. Creates a board of education within the school system, creates a superintendent within DJS, creates an independent board of education within DJS, creates a superintendent within DJS, removes the responsibility from MSDE of teaching students from MSDE to Department of Justice, but actually Department of Juvenile Services, and it falls under the superintendent's purview, and all the staff does as well. Alice, you want to go through the amendments that we included in this bill?
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Vice Chair. Oh, sorry, too eager. So as the chair mentioned, this creates a board that will oversee education under the auspices of the Department of Juvenile Services. So the first thing that, and what I've sent to you is a combination of the amendments that the Judiciary Committee adopted and that we are proposing here today. So the first thing is to make this board an independent unit within the department, so to give them some leeway to set educational policies the way that they see best fit. The members of the board are altered in this omnibus amendment. One educator must be who is employed by the state and engaged in educating juveniles who reside in a state facility is added to the board. And the amendment provides for that member's election. It should be whoever gets the most votes from that person's co-equals. Additionally, the board is required to the extent practicable to reflect the diversity of the student population that the department serves. Additionally, there's an amendment that goes throughout the subtitle that pertains to the education of juveniles who are detained in DJS to replace instances in which the original bill said that the department would have the auspices of educating those juveniles to saying that the superintendent that this bill creates.
So we can instead of going all the way through, Alistair, we can take sections, and then we're gonna see if anybody has any questions.
Okay.
Okay, so just let me know when you're done with a section. And
okay, I think that covers the board section. So if anyone has a question on the board section.
Got it. Fair enough. Cool. Right. Any questions? Delegate Guyton. I see you.
Thank you. So I do board and superintendent section. So on the amendment that I'm looking at right now, I just want to make sure that I understand. So the juvenile services will have its own superintendent of schools separate from the state superintendent of schools, but the state superintendent of schools will serve as a member of the board of juvenile services. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so are there qualifications listed in this bill for the juvenile services superintendent? And are there qualifications listed for the board members? Because I see on page 4, letter C of the amendment that I'm looking at, it just sort of stops in the middle of the page where it says they need to have high level of knowledge. So is that the same as the new board legislation that we're passing? What's going to be in that?
So yeah, if you scroll to, so this is just a hiccup of the way that reprints happen.
Gotcha. Oh, it keeps going. I'm sorry.
Next page, there's a list of the qualifications that.
Super. That's exactly what I was looking for, and that makes me very happy. So I guess the only question that I really have is, are there qualifications in this bill for the juvenile services superintendent of schools?
I believe so, yes.
Gotta find them.
I don't think we specify that. That is covered in section 9506, and it is up to the judgment of the board to hire the state superintendent that they see fit, and they have to have those qualifications. So I think the intent of the legislation is hoping that in having those qualifications, they will hire someone who is qualified. But yeah, that's the state of it without specifics there.
Okay.
And
Was there any interest in adding, similar language to how they elect the state superintendent to this bill?
we could.
Requiring educational expertise. Sort of.
Yeah, no, we could. I mean, that's fair. It's a fair point.
Thank you.
So we can just adopt that exact language that we passed in my bill, that we passed recently. We can just adopt that language. I think that's a good call. Cool. Okay.
Is there any other? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'll say Delegate Guyton or anyone else has any other questions on these sections concerning the superintendent or the board itself? Seeing none, let's move on.
Okay, so on page 9, what's labeled page 9 of the bill, there's a new subsection that says that the expert review teams that are established under section 5411 of the education article shall oversee.
Sorry, Alistair, can we go back to page 8 of the bill just to make it clear to everyone what we're doing in this section?
Oh, yeah, sure.
601.
Yeah, so as the bill was originally introduced, basically subtitle 5 is just like the procedural stuff, who's in charge, the governance of this education. Subtitle 6 is where you get into the meat of the actual education that's going to be occurring. And the way the bill was originally written, that education was done by the Department of Juvenile Services. And I believe there's a feeling that they're not the appropriate body to be doing that.
I can say that. They're not the appropriate body to be doing that. So we wanted the superintendent with educational experience to be managing this work and doing this work, not Department of Juvenile Services.
So all throughout that whole subtitle, where the department was originally given the authority to educate students, it's now the superintendent.
Correct. Cool. All right, let's move on.
Okay, so on the next page, on page 9 of the reprinted bill, there is a mention that juvenile education programs shall be subject to review from the expert review teams that are established under Title 5.4, Section 5411 of the education article. Those are the expert review teams that were brought into existence under the Kerwin bill, the blueprint that was adopted recently. And there's, I think, again, a thought that there's going to need to be some analysis of how education is proceeding in accordance with this bill. Section 9604 has an amendment that the department is required to notify a juvenile in its custody of the juvenile's rights, and the juvenile is required to affirm the receipt of that. Section 9604 in general should likely look familiar to you, as it's very similar to Delegate Boyce's bill that we passed. It requires that records be transferred between county boards of education and the department. Section 9605 covers how the educational cost of educating these students works. As the bill was originally written, the average educational cost for any student in the county who was detained for more than 15 days was transferred from the county board to the Department of Juvenile Services. There's an amendment that makes it so that it is proportionate to the amount of time spent in juvenile services, and that is the cost that's transferred. So if someone spends only 15 days, they will only get 1/15 of the, or not 1/50, 15 out of 180, whatever that number is, of the average. Delegate Eversole may help me out. Section 9606 has an annual reporting requirement beginning the first year after this goes into effect. The superintendent is required to report to the state, to the General Assembly and the governor on student outcomes, external organizational partnerships, the transitions between enrollment in public school and custody of the department. And also that information must be disaggregated by race, English language proficiency, students who receive free and reduced price meals, and students who receive special education services. The board is subject to audits by the Office of Legislative Audits, and the Department of Legislative Services shall conduct an audit at the 5-year mark of this board's existence in July 1, 2027, and at the 8-year mark in July 1, 2030. So I think that's a good place to stop, probably, if anyone has any questions.
Anyone has any questions? Seeing none, let's go on to, Hornberger.
I'm just texting with some of my colleagues here. The bill's joint assigned to judiciary, right? And are these amendments that they voted on, or these amendments that we have come up with?
So let me explain. So judiciary, it's this bill last year was primary for us. Then it switched to primary for judiciary this year. And so they voted out amendments. They voted out one amendment. They sent it to us.
Okay.
Now it's our turn to take on the amendment. So
So the amendments that we're reviewing now are our suggestions.
correct.
Yeah, for the most, there's a couple things that they had voted, and we'll get to some more. This is kind of an omnibus of their amendment plus our amendment. They had the amendment for the membership of the board, including that educator member. And there's also some amendments on making sure that the pension system works, because we're transferring employees from one department to another, making sure their pensions are retained and that they retain the same rights. But other than that, most of what we're talking about is amendments by the Education Subcommittee.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next section.
Okay, so section 9607 is a new section that's amended here, and this is requiring that within a 2-year period of setting this educational system up, the department must contract with a public or private entity to conduct an empirical review of how education is working under.
Can I interrupt for just a second? I'm scrolling around a bit. So when you say what section, can you also say page for us, please?
Yes, this is on page 12 of the reprint. It continues on to a secondary part of page 12 of the reprint. So this private entity is required to conduct a thorough study of many aspects of education under the system, student disciplinary outcomes, how efficiently students are transferring between county boards and custody of the department, the access to mental health services, how conducive the educational setting is to learning. And the entity, after reviewing all that information, must develop recommendations to improve the education that's delivered under this subtitle. And that entity must report to the General Assembly on or before October 1, 2026, which is 5 years into the existence of this entity.
All right, that's it. Any questions?
I have a question of a general.
Delegate
nature,
Ebersol.
if you don't mind. Thank you very much.
Question. Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So one of the things I think probably already exists is that educators in this system, even as regulated by MSDE, I think they're represented by AFSCME for the most part. And I would guess that their certification requirements are essentially similar or the same as teachers who teach in schools that are not juvenile services schools. Is that correct so far?
Yes, I believe so.
Is there any chance that this new board could change the regulations and require more or less of those teachers in terms of certification and working? In this case, could they do that? And should we maybe amend it to say that they will stick with I don't know exactly what you would say, requirements that currently exist or requirements that State Department of Education sets for teacher certification and teacher qualification?
Well, Delegate, on page 14 of the reprint, near the very end, there's a requirement that the provisions of any collective bargaining agreement shall continue to apply until the bargaining unit for the staff and the state negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement. So I don't think that the board can set new rules without that negotiation taking place.
So it was two-pronged though, because they could they also reduce the requirements of teachers to be certified to teach these students? I don't want these students to be taught by teachers that are, less certified or not as qualified. So that it was a two-pronged question, one about teacher representation, but also about requirements of them. Do we need to have a guardrail on that so that they will stick with state, the sort of level of expectation that the state has for students, for teachers, for professionals?
I'm not sure what's covered in the collective bargaining agreement. There might be someone on this call who might be able to help with that. I'm not sure.
But some of that's not collective bargained. Like, I don't get to collective bargaining what my requirements are. The state sets them. They tell as a teacher what I have to do to be certified. And I don't believe the collective bargaining agent bargains what it is that I get to do. They bargain other work conditions. So I'm concerned that they may, specifically, I'm concerned that they might reduce their requirements to attract people here when in fact, I feel like these students need the best possible instruction they can get. So I'm going to recommend that if it's not already existing, that we put in some sort of guardrail to keep the requirements the same.
Delegate Ebersol, from my understanding, they can't go below the state certifications. No.
Okay, and we think that's somewhere else in code then?
Correct.
Okay, I'm satisfied if that's true. I just want to make sure it is, that's all. And maybe.
I just got confirmation that it's true.
Who in the group knew that and sent it to you?
Don't worry about that, man. Don't worry about that, man. I got people over here.
Hornberger, stop acting so smart and send to the chair notes. No, thank you. It's comforting to know that that's true. It's an important piece of it. And as long as it exists elsewhere, then I'm satisfied. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for the questions. Great questions. Great questions. Any other questions? Any other amendments to the bill or to its title? Hearing none.
Sound like the speaker.
I'm joking. Delegate Rose.
We have how the Judiciary Committee voted on this bill thus far, or if they have voted on the whole bill, or where they are on it.
I think it was voted unanimously.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was unanimous. I can double check.
It was unanimous.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the amendments that we're adding here are clarifying and reporting and ensuring that it remains independent body outside of DJS. Just for history, this was the education, the responsibility for educating our students in DJS was the responsibility of DJS years ago. Then it's to MSDE, and now we're switching it back to DJS, kinda. Under this bill, we're trying to make it more independent, so this body has a more independent ability to educate our students and have more oversight. And I think that's the purpose of the bill itself, to make sure there's more independent oversight, to make sure there's more, that people are held accountable for educating our students, and more reporting requirements, in which we added here too. And I think it elevates the conversation when you're talking about adding a superintendent of the school system, of the schools. Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of when the student matriculates, will they receive a diploma from their respective county, the service? How will that look once they've graduated?
I don't think it explicitly covers that in the bill. I'm not sure how it happens now, but I think the decision will ultimately be up to this board that's created here.
Okay, I guess where I'm going, if they do go through the program and they are successful, we want them to have the same type of accreditation that if they would have just went through normal school.
Right.
They still would have the same accreditation. They still have a diploma. It wouldn't be a
Okay.
or anything like that. It will still be a diploma. Delegate Hornberger, your questions are answered.
That's good. Thank you.
Cool. Delegate Rose.
You went over it, but I was trying to take notes. Do we have a firm fiscal impact on kind of starting this whole new agency? I know we're transferring some employees over that are already doing the work, but can you kind of make it simple for me a little bit? at all?
Yeah, I think the fiscal note argued that the likely state impact would be roughly the same in doing this because we're just transferring what is currently done to a new entity.
Okay.
There are some additional protections to these students under this new entity, but I believe the analysis was that it would probably be a similar appropriation to what currently goes to MSDE would go to this.
Yeah, because delegate, it's a transfer, remember, and it is they do talk about some state expenditures may increase, but it's not they don't put in here the actual dollar amount so far, but it is a transfer of services from one to the other.
I guess just as a follow-up, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So, but we're hiring a new superintendent and then he'll have staff. So do they already have that does this specific job, or is that a new superintendent with, I'm assuming at that level of expertise would be a fairly highly paid person in the six figures plus their staff?
I think the superintendent will probably be a new position, but I think their staff, sorry, Delegate Guyton, do you want to? Sorry.
Sure, if you don't mind, there is already.
Hold on 1 second. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Alice, do you have an answer to the question? Or Delegate, you seem to have an answer to the question so far. Delegate.
Oh, I thought Alistair called on me for it.
Yeah, no, I shouldn't have done that. Sorry. It's the chair's not mine.
Yeah, go ahead, Delegate Guyton.
Yes, there is an assistant superintendent who is already overseeing that work. So I'm assuming it would be what that salary, which is already over $100,000 for that position generally. But to your point, Delegate Rose, there would be a whole new board and that would cost a significant amount. So that's the only thing I see.
Well, I believe the board members are not eligible for payment. They're, I think, similar to the state board, they're eligible for travel reimbursement and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't outline what the expenditures would be, but it will be a fiscal note to it. So, but again, we're transferring a lot of the work over from one institution to another. Got it. Okay, Delegate Ebersol.
Fiscal note's largely silent on all that because I don't think they're sure how that will play out yet either.
Correct. That is correct. Thank you, Delegate Ebersol. All right, seeing no other questions, do I hear a motion on the amendment? Amendments, I think.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded on the amendments. All those in favor, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? On the bill as amended, do I hear a motion?
Favorable, move favorable, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Is there a second? It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? On this bill, I just want to thank Alistair for his hard work on getting this amendment together and moving this forward. And also the bill sponsor for working with us to find some new amendments and coming up with some great strategies to make it what it is. We are the Education Subcommittee and the Education Committee here. And so this bill is really important to us. I want to make sure there's some pieces in here that create some additional education outcome metrics for our students here in Maryland.
And Mr. Chair, if I may,
Sure.
we had a bill held because Alistair was a little bit in the weeds. And that's because he's been working in early childhood. That's because he's been working so hard for this committee to get this together. So that's the credit to him right there.
Correct. And putting up with a lot of my amendments. So.
And taking phone calls from me.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's move on to the next bill. Hopefully we can get this out. House Bill 522 is a school resource, is deemed as a school resource officer bill. It does have some changes to it from when it was originally introduced. But let's go through it and let's see what we can do with this bill. Alice, you want to tell us what this bill does?
Yeah, so I don't think we've discussed this bill in this subcommittee before, but this bill, as introduced, required that school resource officers could not be assigned to enforce the disciplinary policies of the school. There have been some amendments and they had to be trained in that. There have been some amendments added. The first set pertains to the specialized curriculum that is required for school resource officers and school security employees. In addition to the other information that those individuals have to learn before working as in those positions, they now have to be trained in restorative approaches to discipline, the conduct for which a student is generally disciplined, and that which is generally prohibited under the Student Code of Conduct. Additionally, they have to be trained in some best practices that are developed later in this bill and in some conduct that is prohibited later in this bill. Additionally, in the 2018 bill that created a lot of this code, school resource officers were required to, before they could be, beginning in September 1 of 2019, before they could be employed, they would have to complete that training. Now they additionally have to have an exemplary disciplinary record beginning 2021 September this year, be approved by the principal of the public school to which they are assigned, and meet any other criteria that the Maryland Center for School Safety adopts. For school resource officers, they have to pass a background check that reveals no findings of excessive force, child abuse, crimes of violence, assaults in the second degree, or the violation of an ex parte order. Also, they have to be approved by the principal and meet other standards. And beginning in September of next year, before either employee can be hired or assigned to public school, the school's principal must adopt a behavioral health and safety action plan, which I will get to in a second. Would you like to do the same thing, Mr. Chair, where we go through?
All right, let's see if there's any questions. Sure. Delegate Ebersol.
So I'm catching up here. I see that at the top of page 2, there's some things that have been amended out, but they are, I feel like they're being, and I don't know if we've gotten that far. I feel like they're addressed then, it doesn't have a page number, but farther down through the bill, at the top of one of the reprint page, the second page of a reprint page. At the top of the second page of page 3, is that where we're getting to some of that? In other words, is that still being addressed? Because I think that's a very important part of the bill, what I really liked about it last year.
Correct, that's correct, Delegate Ebersol.
Okay, thank you. I feel much better now, look.
Cool, all right. Any other questions on that section? Delegate Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in addition to, the school resource officers are coming from, I'm speaking to Carroll County, and I'm not sure how they're hired throughout the rest of the state, but ours come directly from our sheriff's department. They're our sheriff's deputies. So they're already going through, because I've had extensive discussions with them, $10,000 to $15,000 psych exams, all sorts of screening already. And they wouldn't be hired or assigned to be an SRO without going through those processes. So now we're adding additional screening.
Well, so Delegate Rose, that most of that training exists already. It's already a requirement in law from the 2018 law. You have to get this additional training before you can be assigned as an SRO. And that's how it happens in all throughout the state, that they're assigned from other local law enforcement agencies. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not the training. Maybe I misspoke. I meant the screening.
Yes.
There's additional screening. Are they going to have duplicative screening that's going on? They're going to be hired in the first place, then they get assigned to a school, and then they're going to get screened again.
So I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if we got there yet, Delegate, or unless you're talking about the on page 3 of the reprint.
Yeah, I think
the disciplinary record. Is that what you're talking about? Disciplinary record piece?
Yeah, when you said they have to have the exemplary, I'm sorry, I'm taking notes. I'm a note person, sorry. You mentioned the additional criteria and the exemplary, their exemplary record, and then they have to be approved by the principal. So I'm wondering if you can explain to me what that looks like. So our sheriff's department hires a deputy, they become a deputy, and then our sheriff decides, we'd like to assign you to XYZ school. What happens at that point? Can you explain that process?
Ooh,
We're getting the bell.
All right, so that is our time. So what we'll do is hold this. Delegate Rose, if you can just note your questions and we'll come back to them.
I will.
Afterwards, and we'll be able to answer to them. But I would just say that we are adding the additional work, additional review, and I think that's appropriate to have that, but we can talk about it.
hold.
But thank you very much, everybody, and we'll meet later to talk about this.